As the golden sun dipped low across the vast amber-drenched prairie, the warm hues of twilight began to cast long shadows across the dusty plains of the Dakota Territory, where time itself seemed to have slowed down to honor the stillness of the land. Beneath the creaking beams of a weathered wooden cookhouse, nestled under the sloped roof of hand-hewn timbers, a young woman named Clara moved with silent grace, her skirt swaying gently with every purposeful step as she stirred the simmering pot of stew hanging above a slow-burning fire. Her soft, determined hands, stained slightly with earth and tomato juice, worked carefully as she tasted, adjusted, and stirred again, her expression one of quiet concentration. She was the heart of the ranch unofficially, of course, but no man here would deny that the evenings felt emptier without her warm meals and quiet presence. The scent of roasted onions, tender beef, and fresh garden herbs wafted into the open air, carried by the breeze to the group of rugged cowboys gathered a few yards away. Their dust-covered boots kicked up as they leaned back in rough wooden chairs, sweat slicked from a long day of branding, herding, and fixing broken fences under the unforgiving sun. They watched her in reverent silence, some with shy smiles tucked beneath the brims of their wide-brimmed hats, others stealing glances between sips of dark amber beer poured generously into tall glasses that clinked occasionally in the fading light. The leader of the ranch hands, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a jaw like chiseled granite and eyes the color of stormy skies, stood apart from the rest. His name was Wyatt, and he was known across the plains for his stoicism, for the scar that ran just above his right cheekbone, earned in a bar fight during his drifting years, and for the way he never quite smiled, except, maybe, when Clara was around. Tonight, like so many nights before, he found his gaze lingering on her longer than he intended, drawn not just by her beauty, which was quiet and unassuming, but by the way she seemed to belong to the land the same way the river did, or the cottonwoods that swayed just beyond the paddock. Her dress, a simple beige number stained here and there from years of use, hugged her frame not in the way of vanity, but in the way of practicality and purpose. There was something honest in every thread, in every rolled-up sleeve, and in the way her apron tied at her slender waist. The fire crackled beneath the pot, its gentle popping mixing with the low murmur of cowboy laughter, the occasional neigh of horses from the nearby corral, and the distant, familiar hoot of a barn owl calling out from the trees. The sun's final rays caught in her hair thick, wavy, and the color of chestnuts and made it glow like strands of copper, and Wyatt took a sip of his drink to cool the heat that suddenly rose in his chest. He knew better than to fancy her, he with his dusty past and haunted eyes, she with her innocence, her steady kindness, but the heart wants what it wants, and his had long since given itself over to her, quietly, hopelessly. Clara, for her part, pretended not to notice the way he looked at her, though she felt it as surely as she felt the heat of the flames. She had grown used to the eyes of men, she had to, growing up on a homestead surrounded by brothers and cowhands, but Wyatt's gaze was different. It wasn't hungry or expectant. It was heavy, full of something unspoken, something that made her heart flutter in ways she didn't dare admit aloud, not even to herself. She glanced over at him now, catching his eye for a fleeting second, and the corner of her lips tugged up into the faintest of smiles before she quickly turned her attention back to the stew. Dinner was served as the sky turned lavender, stars beginning to wink into view as the first whispers of night settled over the land. The men lined up, tipping their hats to her as she ladled the hot, fragrant stew into tin bowls, each cowboy offering a word of thanks or a tired nod of appreciation. When Wyatt approached, he didn't speak right away. He simply held out his bowl, and as she filled it, their fingers brushed briefly, accidentally, but long enough to send a jolt through both of them. "Smells real fine tonight, Clara," he said at last, his voice rough but gentle, the kind of voice that held weight even in the lightest of phrases. "Thank you, Wyatt," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, and for a moment neither of them moved, lost in the silence that buzzed louder than words. Then he nodded and walked away, taking his seat at the edge of the table, where he could still see her as she sat by the fire, finally serving herself, her face flushed from the heat dot as the night wore on and the laughter grew louder, fueled by full bellies and stories of the day's blunders. Clara sat quietly, cradling her bowl in her lap and watching the flickering flames. Across the table, Wyatt watched her in turn, his heart aching with the weight of all the things he couldn't say. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the dry grass and carrying with it the scent of lavender and firewood. From the barn, the soft whinny of a horse cut through the quiet. Clara's thoughts wandered, drifting to memories of her mother's kitchen, to childhood summers and lessons about strength and softness, about how a woman could hold a home together with flour, fire, and the right kind of silence. She remembered those words now as she looked around these rough men, this hard land, and the strange peace she had carved for herself within it. After the dishes were cleared and the fire donned to glowing embers, Clara stood and began gathering the bowls, moving with the same quiet purpose she had arrived with. She was nearly finished when she felt someone beside her. Turning, she found Wyatt standing there, his hat in his hands, eyes unreadable in the low light. "Let me help," he said, and before she could refuse, he was already collecting the remaining utensils, his large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle. They worked in silence, side by side, the quiet between them no longer awkward, but full of something warm and waiting. When the last dish was set aside, Clara straightened and looked up at him, their eyes locking in a way that made the air feel heavy. "You don't have to stay, Wyatt," she said softly, unsure of what she meant, if it was a warning or wish. "Maybe I don't," he replied, voice low, almost vulnerable. "But I want to." She swallowed hard, unsure what to say next, her heart beating wildly in her chest. In that moment, beneath the stars, with only the sounds of the ranch behind them and the scent of fire lingering in the air, something shifted. He stepped closer, slowly, watching her face as if seeking permission. When she didn't pull away, he raised a hand to brush a strand of hair from her cheek, his touch light, reverent, like he was afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Clara," he said her name like a prayer, and she looked up at him, her eyes wide and uncertain, but open. "I've thought about this for a long time," he admitted, his voice barely above the whisper of the wind. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered back, placing her hand over his. "I know." And just like that, the space between them vanished, and his lips met hers in a kiss that was both hesitant and full of years of unspoken longing. It was soft, slow, and aching, the kind of kiss that spoke of trust and hope, and of two people who had waited too long to say what their hearts had always known. They pulled apart slowly, eyes still locked, breaths mingling in the cool night air. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the world around them holding its breath. And then Clara smiled, that same small, quiet smile she'd given him before. And this time he smiled back, really smiled, something rare and unguarded that lit up his whole face. They stood there a while longer, not needing words, not needing anything but the knowledge that something had begun, finally, beneath the stars and beside the dying fire. And somewhere in the distance, the prairie sighed as if it too had been waiting for this moment. The fire crackled low as the prairie wind drifted through the cookhouse, rustling Clara's loose strands of hair. She kept her hands busy, kneading dough with steady rhythm, though her heart beat unevenly beneath her apron. Wyatt stood beside her now, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. He didn't speak at first, he rarely did, but the silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It pulsed with memory, with a kiss beneath the stars that Neither had dared mention since. "You still thinking about that night?" he asked, voice low, rough like warm leather. Clara's hands paused. She looked up, eyes meeting his, steady and soft. "Yes," she whispered, not daring to say more. Wyatt stepped closer, his hat still in hand, his gaze filled with a kind of patience she hadn't known men could carry. "So am I," he said. Simply. The light shifted around them as the sun slipped below the horizon, casting the land in tones of gold and rose. Around them, the cowboys laughed and drank, the world continuing. But here, at this small wooden table beside the fire, too, hearts hovered in the quiet space between what had been said and what hadn't yet. Asterisk.